If you haven't heard already, Joe Rogan recently had a biblical scholar in Wes Huff, and they talk about all the history of the Bible. Now, it's a 3-hour-long conversation, so it was a bit long. Now, let's take a look at the most shocking parts that had Joe Rogan wowed. I mean, quite literally, he was just like, wow, wow, wow.
Wow, 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 wow.
I mean, he said wow so many times, might as well call this podcast the Owen Wilson Experience. The first one is the hidden treasure map that is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, this had me baffled as well. To be honest, I didn't hear about it till now, stating that there was a treasure 65 tons worth of gold. That's equivalent to $3 trillion today.
What is the oldest version of the Bible or the stories in the Bible? Is it the Dead Sea Scrolls or are there older versions?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, so they were discovered in 1946 to 1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
How old are they?
They're anywhere between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC. So it's kind of tricky because the Dead Sea Scrolls they're like a library that we refer to. So it's approximately 970 documents, but it's distributed out between 10,000 and 11,000 fragments. So there's a lot going on there, right? So, and some of these, I mean, are so fragmentary that you look at them and it's like confetti. Because they're, 3,000 years old, but not quite that. They're like 2,000 plus years old, right?
Animal skins too, right?
Yeah, well, all sorts of things. Stuff like this, it's papyri, it's animal skins, and it's a number of different languages. So the vast majority of it is in Hebrew, but there's also a lot in Aramaic and then Greek and in Nabatean. So it's like an umbrella term to just describe a whole bunch of literature. So a lot of it is biblical because it was written by this group out in the desert called the Essenes who lived at Qumran. So, but then other stuff of it is just, it's just Jewish literature of various stripes that were hidden in caves all around the Dead Sea.
So the scrolls, as it were, aren't all biblical. Some of them is just a counting of the times.
Yeah. One of the coolest ones, actually this relates because I know you're a Marco Allegro guy. The first time I was introduced to Marco Allegro was not his Sacred Mushroom and the Cross stuff, but he published a book on what's called the Copper Scroll, because part of the Dead Sea Scroll fragments is this inscribed document on copper, which is an ancient treasure map.
Can you see it? Is it online?
Yeah, Jamie, pull up hey.
There it is. Wow.
Yeah. So it's in Hebrew, and it is wild. So it has these sites where it says buried treasure is found.
Whoa.
And there have been a number of guys who have tried to look for it. 65 tons of gold and 26 tons of silver.
65 tons.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. How many Cuban links can you make out of that?
You can see why someone would try to track that down.
Boy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the second one is the Book of Isaiah. Now, the modern one that we have was from the Middle Ages, but the one that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls pushed it back 1,000 years earlier. And not only that, it was found word for word the same.
When we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have ones like the Great Isaiah Scroll, which is fully complete. It's a copy of the Book of Isaiah, and it's a full complete scroll.
So when you say the Book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the Book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
When we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Now, the third one is what is the oldest manuscript from the New Testament? What's the oldest version of the gospel? When was it written?
Yeah. I make papyri facsimiles. So you were talking about what is our oldest manuscript evidence. So this guy is P52. John Ryland's 457. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript. So when we're talking about what is potentially our oldest evidence for the New Testament, this manuscript that most likely comes from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, is the one that usually is universally accepted as our oldest one. And that contains John 18, where Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And Jesus says, everyone who follows the truth, who is following the truth, follows me. And on the back has the words of Pilate saying, what is truth? Wow. Well, we discover this guy. C.H. Roberts is, literally going through these piles of manuscripts in these drawers that are being like stashed away. And he finds this guy and he sees that it's written on both sides, which is almost exclusively a Christian convention. Because in the ancient world, they used scrolls. And the Christians, for reasons we're not entirely clear on, they start to make codices, books. And so they write on both sides. And so he says, okay, this is written on both sides manuscript. So he sends it off to the leading paleographers, or guys who date manuscripts. And they all say, this is the beginning of the 2nd century. And so there's still debate about the dating of this, but the unanimous consensus is that it's comfortably second century, potentially the beginning of the 2nd century, which means that this is found in Egypt. John is probably writing his gospel in Ephesus. So it has to be written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript. Wow. Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
Wow.
And this is a question for a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians alike, atheists, agnostics, and believers. Why was the Bible translated? Why couldn't it just stay in its original form? Why was the translation necessary for the development of the church?
They wanted the plowboy to be able to read the Bible and know it as well as the priests. And so that was their motivation, is that they're like, public education for literacy in these areas was largely because they just wanted people to read the Bible. But that was a big motivation behind Luther, was he's like, I'm going to translate this thing into German. Because part of his kind of kicking off of what we call the Protestant Reformation was that he read the Bible in Greek, because there was a guy named Desiderius Erasmus who was they call them humanists, but it means something different than now. Humanists were like scholars who were trying to figure out the entirety of human knowledge up until that point.
Whoa. Like
Renaissance men, kind of, right? So Desiderius Erasmus is like one of the last true Renaissance men. But he was compiling, and he produced the first printed edition of the Greek New Testament. And so he comes out with this printed edition of the Greek New Testament, and Luther gets his hands on it. And so he's reading that, and he notices that in Matthew's gospel, the word that's in the Latin is penitentiam agite, do penance. In Greek is metanoite, which is repentance. And the church was using this as like, you need to do penance. You need to, do all of this stuff to show that you're sorry. And part of that was, paying the church. And Luther reads this and he goes, hey, guys, this means something different. This means repentance. It means changing your mind. It doesn't mean like to actually do things. And so part of his motivation is like, the Latin isn't reflecting, at least at the point that Latin had developed in that day. Like maybe when Jerome translates the Latin Vulgate back in the 4th century, and it's called the Vulgate because Vulgata means like regular. Like you think of vulgar, right? It's just the regular people language. Part of the reason was that in the 4th century, very few people were reading Greek. They were reading Latin. And so they're like, hey, Jerome, you need to produce a Bible in Latin because nobody can read the Bible anymore. And so he produces the Latin Vulgate. And ironically, by the time you get to Luther, 1,000 years later, no one can read Latin. And they're all using the Vulgate.
Wow, that is fascinating. Wow.
Now, you, me, and most people will probably wouldn't know this, but traditionally, if you go by the biblical structure of this world, hell is in Sheol, or the underworld, and the underworld is located in the sea.
And then the storm happens, and then they throw him overboard down into the sea and down into the fish, and the fish takes him down into the depths of the sea. And when Jonah prays, he says, I cry out from the depths of Sheol, which is the realm of the dead. So there is actually a form of, it argues that Jonah actually died and was resurrected when he was spit up by the fish. And it could be because in the Gospels, Jesus says, all the people are following him and they keep asking him for miracles because they're like, we saw you do miracles. Do more miracles for us. You know, come on, do a trick, Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus says, the only miracle you're going to get is the sign of Jonah. That just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, I will be in the belly of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. You know, prediction of his own death and resurrection. But there is an argument within rabbinical literature that when Jonah says that he's crying out from the depths of Sheol, it's because he's actually dead. And that's one interpretation. But another interpretation could just be that he saw and understood, as a person of his day, the depths of the ocean as where the dead people ended up anyways. Like your soul goes down into the chaos and the disorder of Sheol, which is the realm of the dead.
Now, after a long conversation lasting nearly 3 hours, after everything they've talked about, what does Joe Rogan believe? Does he believe in Jesus? Does he not? What does he think of it all?
In all of this, what do you think of Jesus? Like in terms of your own like journeying and trying to find answers to ultimate questions. What do you think of the historical person of Jesus?
Well, it certainly seems like there's a lot of people that believe that there was this very exceptional human being that existed. So the question is, what does that mean? Does it mean he was the Son of God? Does it mean he was just some completely unique human being that had this vision of humanity and this way of educating people and spreading this ideology that would ultimately change the way human beings interact with each other forever? So what is he the Son of God? Well, are we all? That's another question, right? Do we all have that inside of us? Do we all have that ability to change everything around us inside of us? Do we all have that unique connection to the divine? And is he a representation of the best version of that? Or was he an actual person that was the Son of God? And is it important?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what does it mean? It's just the fact that it's a question to ponder is a miracle in itself, in a way. Just the fact that there's this concept of this person that died for our sins, that's the Son of God, but you have to you have to believe in a bunch of stuff to go that way. Like, just the concept of that is interesting to people, because what it can do to people is offer them a very unique way to change the way they feel about the world itself. And if you do follow that, I know a lot of Christians are hardcore Christians. They're some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. So it does work. Right? Like, if you do live like a Christian and you do follow the principles of Christ, you will have a richer, more love-filled life. So it is true, right? Atheists, they vary just like Christians vary. But the worst versions of them are essentially believers in the religion of atheism.
Right.
They worship the concept of there being no God, and this is it. When you die, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And that to me is always so arrogant. Just the fact that you exist at all is so bizarre and so spectacular. The idea that you know for sure that when the lights shut out that's a wrap, like, because there's no evidence of the contrary. Well, okay.
Kind of assuming your conclusion there.
Absence of evidence is not evidence. It's especially when you're talking about something that's as bizarre as death. And especially when you have people that have near-death experiences that are radically similar.
Yeah.
Those are really weird. They're really weird how many similarities people have in these near-death experiences from accidents and all sorts of things that people, come back from, where their heart stops beating, they see themselves above their body. There's a lot of weirdness to it that makes you, I just think it's a little silly, because how could you know what you don't know?
Yeah.
You cannot know what you don't know. And the problem is that there's a cachet, that there's a social credit amongst academics in particular, that's that's ascribed to a person who is atheist, a person who is, he's brilliant, he's not silly, he doesn't believe in myths, he doesn't. I get it. I get why there's social pressure in that regard. I get it, but to not look at the universe itself, just this creation engine of planets and stellar nurseries, just the bizarreness of the epicness of it all, and to not wonder if maybe you have a very narrow perception of what this whole thing is all about.
Yeah. Deny the virgin birth, but not the virgin birth of the universe.
Yeah. Well, all of it, like everything, just the big. There's so many more impressive miracles than any of the things that people think of in the Bible. It's just they're so weird in our day and age that we're not willing to, like. If we want to think that things are very clean and easy to measure, and they often are not. And I think most of what it means to be a human being in a meaningful way is not measurable. Most of it, love and friendship and community, these things are not very measurable. They're very strange. The bond that people have with their family and their loved ones, and it's very strange. That love connection, whatever love is, whatever good is, it's a very real thing, and it seems to not exist, certainly not in the volume in other animals that exists in us. There's obviously nurturing in other animals. They nurture their loved ones, but their perception of life and death and all of it is very different than ours. So it leads me to why is our version of life so much more rich and complicated than any other being that exists? And why do we have this insatiable desire to learn and know more? Yeah. What is it?
Why does this, however many 3 pounds of gray matter in my brain, why is that able to plummet the intricacies of the universe? Right. Like, and I think that's ultimately the questions that we should be asking in terms of, you matter more than you are matter. There's something going on there.
There's something going on with all of us.
Yeah.
We kind of know it and we don't know it. But it's just, you can't measure it and you can't put it on a scale. And so people don't like that.
Yeah.
They don't like that. It makes them feel dumb to believe in that. It makes them feel dumb to even speculate, to even just say, what do you think happens when you die? Like, even that conversation is like, people don't like that. Nothing. It goes dark and that's it. It's over. That's it. You die. Like, how the fuck do you know? Have you died? Like, you don't know.
And you don't know how you can wrap your head around that particular claim.
It matters of consciousness and how we can prove our existence. Rene Descartes said, Dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. Meaning, I doubt, therefore I think, and I think, therefore I am. And furthermore, I may add that the more we think, the more we become. For knowledge brings us life, but experience brings us truth. And in short, you can never truly know until you experience. So for however long you have, experience as many things as you possibly can, to meet as many people, to travel as far as you can, to live as many lives as you want, pursue many different talents, many different passions, live life to the fullest so that you may know the highest. For the greatest things in life, the best things can never be recorded. It can only be felt. No matter how many views you get online, it's not going to matter. Because the only thing that matters is the people who see you in real life. The people that will truly get to know you. And that's where life is found. In our shared connections together, our unity, our harmony. That's when everything starts to come alive. And if you ain't alive in that sense, then it's impossible to prove life and anything beyond it. Because God is great. That's his main characteristics. The greatness of God. And if you refuse to be great yourself, then you will miss the mark and fail to see God for what he is. If you live in the mundane, you will never truly see the colors of God. And you'll be forever trapped in the monochrome of life. You must reach for the stars, but in order to achieve the impossible, you must first touch the invisible. So there you go, another episode of The Third Eye. Hope you liked this video, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's grow this channel together and build a community of enlightened souls. This is 30, helping you see life in plain sight. See you in the next one. Ka.